Hello, Honors 410. Hope everyone had a great weekend. For today's class, we have a new cluster of flash pieces, so I'll definitely give you some time to read through all of those and have our usual good discussion of your peers' work. But for the rest of today's class, there's two main things I wanted to accomplish. One is we will carry forward, as always, with the Stephen Moore and talking about our reading for today. But the other big thing I wanted to do, I think I wanted to really kind of lead off with today, was talking through the big set of assignments that come up towards the tail end of this class. So the first part begins towards the end of this month and stretches through most of November, right up until kind of the Thanksgiving break, and then we'll kind of pick up with some last bits after the holiday. But so this is the workshop draft, workshop participation, and the revised draft. So for the workshop draft, it's the biggest writing assignment of the semester for this class. Basically, I'm asking you to do something where you're writing a piece that's 4 to 6 pages in length. And it's really wide open in terms of what this can be. So in the assignment prompt, which I'm going to post below, and I encourage you to kind of look at and follow along if that's helpful to you, or at least look at after you've watched the video lecture, you can do the three main categories of things. One is a relatively traditional critical argumentative essay. So similar to what we did in short form earlier on in the semester, but it's a more fully realized version of that. 4 to 6 pages in length is probably along the lines of what most of you did for your Honors 110 classes, where it's thesis driven, and you're going to have to use, for sure, some source of material. So that can be readings we've used throughout the semester, that can be outside research sources, that could be both. I'm not assigning any minimums or maximums in terms of source material, but you're making sure that your voice, your argument is kind of foregrounded and kind of basing it on that. The next option would be a narrative essay. So basically, this would be a nonfiction story. So kind of exploring your thoughts around something, your reflections on actually having an experience, or combining that with kind of some more philosophical thinking, but in some way tying into the topic of violence. So it wouldn't have a thesis statement. In most cases, some critical or creative nonfiction, I should say, does have more of a thesis-driven kind of style, but usually it'd be more like you're writing a fictional story, except you're writing it through the lens of things that have actually happened. So this is more along the lines of what Stephen Moore does for most of this book. There are one or two essays that teeter, I would argue, more towards argumentative or even sort of critical in their own way, but for the most part it's storytelling, right? It's kind of speaking from his experience. So it can be that kind of narrative essay, or it can be a completely fictional short story. Full disclosure, I expect this will probably be the most popular option, and that's fine with me. In some ways, I think that tends to be a more fun option for a lot of students, both to write for themselves and also to read when you're sharing it with your peers. But any of these are fair game. I'm open to some other styles as well, or kind of crossing boundary lines between these pieces. I had one student who contacted me already about potentially doing some poetry for this assignment. I'm open to things like that as well. But basically, if you're not falling into one of those main 3 buckets that I identified at the beginning here, reach out to me. Let's talk a little bit about what you're planning to do. It's likely I will let you do something a little outside the box here, but I do want to have a sense of what you're doing and to let you know already, on the off chance it's not really going to meet expectations, to make sure that you're not kind of squandering an opportunity to do well on this assignment, or you aren't really behind the 8 ball when it comes time to do a revision of this, where I'm basically asking you to write something entirely different. So be in touch if you're thinking something different. Again, and if you want to do something more along the lines of fiction, totally fair game. I'm not going to have any biases in terms of how I grade these things, right? So for this first round of it, we're going to have staggered submission dates, which I'll get into a little bit more as we go in here. But basically, we're going to be submitting 3 a day over the course of this, whatever it is. I think it's a 3 or 4 week period, until everyone in class has had an opportunity to go. Most days we'll have 3 a day. It's 19 students divided across these days, so it's not going to be an entirely even number all around. But I think you get the idea there. But students are going to submit work. I'm going to post it, and then for the next class, it's students' homework to read your peers' work, and the class discussion that following class is going to be focused on discussing their work and talking about what's already working well and we can all take away from a piece, what maybe is not working so well, that we have some constructive criticism to share around, and generally questions, things that we can all kind of take away from these pieces. All of that's fair game. But so for this piece, the way I will grade it basically is as long as you turn it in by your due date, by the date that you are assigned / sign up for. I'll talk about that in a moment here. You can expect that you turn it on time and you have a minimum of 4 full pages. And if you cited it appropriately, if you do your research, then you can expect you're going to get an A-level score for this assignment. Basically, I'm grading it for completion and on-time submission. It's if you miss your due date, or if you're just way off the base, where you only give me 2 pages of content, or otherwise just feels like it's really not meeting what it's asked for at all for the assignment, that you would risk getting a lower score for this assignment. To be fully transparent, when I've done this with classes in the past, I usually do something very similar for all of my 410 classes. It's been exceptionally rare that someone doesn't get an A on this assignment. It's usually because they either just didn't turn it in at all or turned in something really short. So the pressure is way off, because basically the idea is when you submit this workshop draft, we're all being kind of vulnerable with each other, kind of like we did for the flash submissions, where you haven't had a ton of time. I know some of you are going to be operating outside your usual wheelhouse of things you're comfortable writing. And so, if you turn it in and meet the general guidelines, you can expect an A-level score. Likely is not a 10 out of 10 for this assignment, or very close to that. You're getting a bunch of feedback from me. I will give that to you, privately when I comment on your submission. You're getting your feedback from your classmates in the class discussion. You'll have all the tools you need to do a better job with the revised draft, right? To kind of take that feedback into consideration and put your best foot forward. That's the draft I'm going to grade more critically, as if it's a more traditional assignment. No guarantees in terms of what your grade will be. But I will say this much, that I'm looking largely at effort. So I don't expect that everyone's going to walk away with a publishable quality short story or critical essay or narrative essay. But I am looking to see that you've put forth the effort to meaningfully revise your piece between the workshop stage and the revised draft stage. Unless you're one of those exceptionally rare cases where I kind of tell you I don't think you need a lot of revision, that I really want you to pay more attention to very specific elements, but not wholesale revision. I would say on average that happens maybe 1 time out of every 2 or 3 times I teach this class. So again, it's very rare that will happen. Looking for effort in the revision. But okay, so to take a step back, and I'm kind of hopping all over the place here, but it's in part why this assignment prompt is structured to introduce all 3 of these aspects of the class at once, is because they are all really intertwined with each other. So I'm giving you the submission dates, as well as the date that would lead to us discussing it below. So usually it's, you submit on a Monday, your piece is discussed on a Wednesday, or you submit on a Wednesday, your piece is discussed on a Monday. The exception to that being Veterans Day kind of falls in the middle of this process, so there's one elongated stretch in between there. But I hope it's pretty clear what the due dates would be and what the following discussion dates would be from each of these. With this, what I'm going to ask you to do is within a week's time, so by 11 a.m. on Monday, October 19th, send me an idea of your preferences for when you would like to submit for this assignment. You can name specific dates, or you can just say in general, I like to go on the early end of this process, or towards the middle of the process, or towards the end of the process. And I will do my best to accommodate everyone's interests. I will give preference to people on a first come, first serve basis. So if you message me, right today, and tell me that you would prefer an early date, the odds are you're going to get your wish, because you'll probably be ahead of the pack. And also early dates tend to not be quite as popular in general. If you say you want a middle date, but you don't let me know until a week from today, I'll do my best to try to accommodate you, but those tend to be popular dates. That's pretty late to let me know. It's less likely I'll be able to get you exactly what you want, though I'll still do my best on that. If you don't let me know a preference, then I'll assume that you're okay with any date whatsoever, so I will randomly assign you to whatever dates are left at that point. So again, all the dates are listed below. Look those over, look at your calendars, look at when you'll be busy. In terms of, I think sometimes students will be a little bit worried because, it's like this specific date, I know I can't, be tied up with anything. Because we have this online remote class, in general, That's not as much of a concern, because if there's a specific date that doesn't work for you, you can just work ahead and submit early, and it's sort of the same. It's not really going to meaningfully make a difference. So it's more though, to let me know your preferences though. Again, if you really feel like you need extra time to be able to do this thing, or if you're the kind of person who knows you work ahead and you're going to have a draft done a week early anyway, it doesn't hurt for you to go early in this process. There are pros and cons to going earlier or later in the workshop process. If you go earlier, obviously the disadvantage is you have less time to put your draft together and you don't get to see as many people's work before you submit yours. The positive side of it is you have the maximum amount of time for your revision. So whereas the people who go at the end of the process are only going to really have a week or two, or give or take, to be able to do revisions at the end of the semester, you'll very comfortably have almost a full month to be able to handle revisions. That kind of takes all the pressure off for the revised draft part of this thing. But obviously there's more pressure early on to generate a draft more quickly. On the flip side of that, if you go late in the process, obviously you have a ton of time. You can see what other people are doing. You can learn from their examples, but you don't have nearly as much time to do your revision. So probably want to be doing a more polished first draft in that case. So again, pros and cons all around. The middle dates obviously have a little bit of each of the pros and cons that go with that. I will say, especially because there tends to be some reticence to submit on that first date or two, I will say I tend to be especially kind in grading folks who submit on the first day or two. So whereas, for this assignment, pretty much everyone can expect to get, a 9 out of 10 score, as long as it's on time and reasonably within expectations. If you submit on the first date, I will all but guarantee you a 10 out of 10 score, unless you really just don't do the assignment at all, or really just it's not at all what I've asked for. But again, it's pretty rare that's going to come up. So that's a little added incentive for folks who do want to submit on those earlier dates or are on the fence about it. So pieces will come in, I'll post them, you'll have until the next class to read them, then we'll discuss them as the meat of the class discussion. I probably will not post very many, if any, video lectures during that time, because we're going to focus just on reading and discussing student work. I'll only give a video lecture if I feel like I need to check in on something and kind of correct course, if it's clear the whole class is kind of missing the boat because I didn't explain something well enough earlier. But in general, I'll kind of stay out of it at that point and just be kind of facilitating the discussion and weighing in there. But so for workshop participation, very similar to our ordinary, class participation in this class, where the expectation is you're, weighing in on every discussion within about 48 hours. So I post it, no later than noon on that Monday or Wednesday, and you have until 48 hours later, that noon, that next day, to participate. With the added bit that the weight of this is a little bit heavier, because basically I want every student to get feedback from all of their classmates. And so because the weight is a little bit higher on you, this is a separate grading item from class participation. I will still be taking attendance, so to speak, and making sure everyone's participating. But really what I want to see is everyone commenting on everyone's piece. You don't need to give comprehensive feedback to everyone. Basically, I'm just looking for at least one substantive comment, on every single workshop draft. So that can be positive, that can be constructive criticism, that can be a question, that can be in between those spaces, and just kind of furthering the discussion. It can be a mixture of them. If you really have things you want to say both on the positive and negative side, that's totally fair game, but doesn't have to be, again, comprehensive. Just one, again, fairly substantive, at least a couple sentences on each of the drafts will get you your credit for that aspect of the class. And then again, after that's all happened, we'll have the revised draft. So you'll have some time. It's not due until, I believe it's the Monday after class is over. So, really a fair amount of time to be able to attend to that. But again, especially if you're going on the early end, you have lots and lots of time. If you're going the late end, not so much time. Usually I will not look at drafts for students for the workshop draft phase, because the whole idea is that you're basically giving us a rough draft, and that you're getting the feedback from me and from your peers, before we have the revised draft. So if you have real concerns, like you just aren't sure if this at all matches the assignment, feel free to, be in touch. But in general, I don't really review drafts at that stage. I'm more open to reviewing drafts to an extent for the revised draft. But again, you've also already gotten a lot of feedback from me and from your peers by that point. So in general, it shouldn't be as necessary by that stage. Okay, so I know that's a lot, but read through the prompt. I think it's all fairly intuitive once you wrap your head around what we're doing, and especially once we've done it a time or two with the class for a workshop. Usually, students are very clear on what's going on in this process, but I know it can be a little confusing when I just throw all this information at you for the first time. But again, I've got the dates posted below. Look those over, and within the next week, and again, sooner is better. Let me know generally what your preferences would be in terms of going earlier or later or towards the middle of that process, or again, if you have specific dates you'd really like to go, I'll do my best to try to accommodate everyone. Usually it works out that we have enough people who are wanting to go early or wanting to go late, and enough people who genuinely don't care that everyone gets at least roughly what they wanted. But let me know what you're thinking, and especially if you have real reasons, like that the first week of submissions or so is just slam packed with stuff in your schedule. If I know a reason why things are especially hard on you for a specific time, that gives me some context so I can kind of wait things out appropriately if I have to make some tough decisions, if two people have pretty much the same preferences and I'm out of spots to give out. Okay, so I hope all is reasonably clear. I'll leave a thread in the discussion thread, though, to field questions about all of this and and see what people think. But okay, so with all that said, to keep this video not much more than 20 minutes, I'm going to do a really quick discussion of Stephen Moore's To Fling Forward in a Certain Way. So to start us out, I want to go to page 86 here. Let's see, and so. Okay, so he has this big block of text here. I'm going to just start reading through. I might not read the whole thing here, but on 86, he's describing this. See here, at the top of your head should remain perfectly level. Watch him move across the screen. Look at the top of his head. See how it's bouncing up and down? Can't have that. You're moving forward only. Now notice this runner's body. It never aligns fully, excuse me. He should be able to draw a straight line from heel up through the leg, through the hip, up the torso and the neck to the top of the head. Straight line top to bottom on every stride. And it goes on from there. And so I'm curious if, first off, this is familiar at all to folks. Have we been in experiences where people pick apart things to this degree, right? Because I'll be transparent. I have run for exercise purposes on and off throughout my life, but never for an official team, never with an official coach, anything like that. And so when I run, basically, I'm just trying to keep going, right? And I know some basics of running form and things that will minimize the chance of the injury and things like that. But I've never thought about it super critically in terms of my exact form. I've never had anyone tape me and studied my form and corrected things, all of that. So I'm curious of why we do this, because there's other parts of my life, like for example creative writing, where I went to graduate school for it, and I had people pick apart my sentences with meticulous detail that really improved my form, or at least I hope that it did. But why we do things like this, why we pick things apart in such a kind of scientific fashion and try to refine them, and what Moore's example might show here, what he's kind of demonstrating. He's saying something about when we reach an expert level of something. I've never seen Stephen Moore run, but I assume at least at this stage of his life, he was quite good at it, right? Better than I've ever been at it, better than I think the average person has ever been at it. And there's something to be said for when you're at an expert level of something, you want to kind of refine it beyond the point of what most people think of, right? So, when I publish a short story, it's usually been through at least conservatively 3 or 4 drafts, right? Where I've gone through and, moved things around and deleted big segments of it and changed things and, refined specific sentences and how they're worded in ways that I think the average person probably wouldn't even notice, right? But I'm sort of at a point in my writing career where I do notice those things, right? And where it makes a difference to me, and I expect it's going to make a difference to the editors I'm submitting a story to. So it's food for thought around all of that. On page 87, there's this piece I really like where it's the coach talking about how they don't need to get themselves psyched up, right? But before they run a race. And basically he talks about how with teenagers, you're already psyched up, right? You don't need to get there, which I think is just a really good lesson to take away for a variety of contexts. A lesson I apply from my own life. There was one time when relatively early in my professional career, I had a phone interview for a teaching job that I was really excited about. And I spent like the hour before the video, listening to music that would get me amped up and kind of, trying to work out some nerves, but also just get myself excited excited to be my best self. And it was such a mistake because I walked into that interview, and it was a phone interview, but still, just my nerves worked up, and when I came across a question relatively early on that I didn't have a very good answer to, I sort of fumbled aggressively into a bad answer and tried to backtrack and correct myself. And it was a lesson in that. That moment, I was already psyched up. My adrenaline was already pumping. I didn't need to pump myself up anymore. In fact, I think I over pumped myself up to the point that it was, harmful to the overall experience. And so I think, when Moore relays this coach talking about that, teenagers are already psyched up, they don't need to get psyched up. That makes some good sense to me, right? About how it'd be more important for them to be calm and thinking about things, coherently, as opposed to, trying to get excited and get their adrenaline up. There's also this piece on page 87 as well, before the break, where he talks about, let's see, where is this? The thing that's, not a miracle, where he's talking about, watching the film Miracle, and talking about this, hockey team, and kind of, where they get themselves, that it's not a miracle, but rather it's a matter of repetitions and, demanding perfection when they're practicing, which I think is also just a really good takeaway, right? And I think most of us who've had success, in any kind of form of something that you consider important in your life, there are exceptions, but in general, I feel like it's less a matter of you got lucky one time, or you were naturally good at something, than that just the sheer matter of iterations and hard work kind of paid off in getting you good at that thing, right? And I constantly preach that in especially my Honors 100 classes, about the writing process, right? Where people come in thinking they're just not good writers, they're not good English students, and usually it's a matter of if you just kind of keep at it, if you just kind of get your reps in, if you keep writing, you get better at these things, right? And so that kind of being a similar process to what I think Moore is discussing here in terms of athletics. On page 90 here, let's see, the last full paragraph, kind of midway through the page, he talks about none of the soldiers seem heroic or very noble or upstanding or glamorous. They were ordinary and sometimes kind of whiny. I figured that maybe they had to act differently inside that brick building across the street. Maybe coming into the station for them meant they could be themselves for a few minutes before they had to return to being soldiers. For me, it was like peeking behind the triumphant sheen of the TV commercials. None of these soldiers seemed like they were doing what the commercials said they were doing, protecting their community, defending their country. They weren't doing anything special at all. They were just doing some kind of job, then taking breaks for soda and cigarettes. Maybe counterintuitively, the military became more attractive to me without the sheen. No one person had to be an idyllic protector of democracy. No one had to be a perfectly tough or invincible. They only had to do a job. And I think this is a really important paragraph here. I think a lot of this book is about more sort of demystifying the military and what the experience is actually like of being a soldier. But he gets at these points where the military experience is more accessible, where these people are mere mortals, where it's relatable to our experience of coming onto almost any job, albeit with different stakes, different settings and all of that. But I feel like that's a pretty important paragraph to the book overall. Okay, I'm going over time that I want to. So I'm going to skip a little bit ahead, and I'm going to add one just kind of broader experience here, where we have the dog Pooja, who is kind of a recurring figure in this essay, and who ultimately meets sort of a untimely end in this thing, which I think is one of the sadder moments of the book in its own way. Especially if you're an animal lover, I think it tends to hit pretty hard here. So I'm not going to give you the answers here. I'm going to especially leave this part open for discussion. But what we think this dog represents, either to Moore or to the book, or both, right? Or kind of either. We kind of can balance between the two. And why we think he renders this dog, right? Because I think in the big pictures of things, this dog probably isn't so important to Moore's story. And yeah, I think what it represents might be more important. It might be something that sticks with readers in a way that maybe we wouldn't expect going into things. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up there. There's obviously a bunch more in this essay we could drill into, and please feel free to go there in your comments. But I'm a few minutes over the time I wanted to go anyway, so thank you for listening. Again, please let me know your preferences about workshop dates, and weigh in the discussion thread below about questions about the workshop draft, the workshop participation aspect of the class, and the revised draft. And then obviously for the more reading as well, I'll be really interested to hear all of your comments. All right, so thank y'all. I'll catch you next time.